no negative trend is sustainable. If you acknowledge that fact, then what is your mission? You are in the relentless pursuit of sales. New customer acquisition. Number 2 is you've got to get existing customers to come more often, and you got to get them to spend more when they do.
Doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. If you're a tech company, if you're a restaurant, there's only 3 ways to make money. Get more customers, get them to come back more often, or get them to spend more money, or increase your prices, essentially. Welcome back to another episode of TechBite. We're always trying to provide these actionable data that you can take back, implement it in your restaurant, and make an impact on your top line revenue, profitability, operational efficiency, and so forth. This is our 3rd episode with Don Fox, the former CEO of Firehouse Subs. If you haven't listened to the prior ones, you should definitely check it out. We started with a couple of interesting topics that was crucial to build to this episode. We talked about franchising challenges of it and how to pick the right franchisees, etc. We talked about technology a little bit and how to maximize the use of technology in order to grow revenue, save money, grow unit counts, etc. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of top-line revenue. Why is it important and how do we drive it? So without further ado, Don, thanks for being here again. Let's drill right into it. Can you explain why top-line revenue growth is crucial for long-term sustainability of a restaurant?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in the prior episode, no negative trend is sustainable. And that is truest of sales, perhaps more than anything else. Obviously, you're in a negative sales trend. If it's sustained, you're out of business. So if you acknowledge that fact, then what is your mission? You are in the relentless pursuit of sales, because staying status quo is not sustainable either. And the recent years of inflation are a very vibrant reminder of that. Anybody who's got the same sales level from 3 years ago is in pretty bad trouble at this point, with the way inflation has eaten up, driven their costs and eaten up their bottom line. So you have to be relentless about it, constantly growing the top line. Not everybody always has that trajectory. Probably very few brands do. There were times at Firehouse we had some ups, we had some downs, but I'll tell you what, anytime we had a down, the fire alarm was going off. And because again, that has got to get reversed as soon as possible. In fact, perhaps one mistake I made earlier in my tenure, it was in 2013. We had had an unbelievably successful comp sales year in 2012, double-digit positive. We had rolled out Coca-Cola Freestyle in our system that year. That was a catalyst for these phenomenal sales successes. And then when we comped over that, we were negative. Didn't give it all back. Gave away a few points. And I should have reacted to that more urgently at the time. At first, well, yeah, of course, yeah, we're going against the really, really tough numbers from last year, and that's somewhat to be expected, and mistake. I should have been just as relentless about it. Maybe wouldn't have been successful, but should have treated it with more urgency, because that negative comp period went on a little bit longer than I intuitively thought it would. And then that was when the alarm, when to me, I realized, oh wow, I should have lived more by my own principle and stayed relentlessly aggressive on keeping positive sales. And by the way, traffic. Which is fundamentally important. You've got to keep more mouths and stomachs coming through the door if you're really going to have true growth.
Yeah, we'll get into the levers in a second, but yeah, it's scary because I did a ton of research before I got into Milagro, and the number one reason that restaurants are not profitable because it stems from that top line revenue growth. majority of the restaurants that you're starting off and your aim is to do 500, 700, average restaurant is about 700,000. And at those levels, it's just extremely difficult. It doesn't matter if it's a restaurant or, Joe's Lawn Company. At 700,000, it's just very difficult to earn a living wage for yourself and pay everybody else, and you're going to run into those problems: thin margins, high labor costs, high food costs, etc., all because that top line revenue is not there. But if you get to 1 million, and once you cross 1 million and you start going above 1 million, the numbers in a restaurant look extremely attractive. It becomes a sustainable, viable business to operate and earn a decent wage from it. So absolutely agree that your goal should be relentless growth in top line revenue, and do everything you can to do that. And then obviously let's talk about the levers. What are the top 2 or 3 most effective ways that you implemented in order to grow top line revenue?
Well, I'll say 3 things. New customer acquisition. Number 2 is you've got to get existing customers to come more often, and you got to get them to spend more when they do.
I love it. I gotta pause you for a second. This is amazing because I say, look, in any business, anyway. So I say there's only 3 ways. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. If you're a tech company, if you're a restaurant, there's only 3 ways to make money: get more customers, get them to come back more often, or get them to spend more money, or increase your prices, essentially. So go ahead.
Yeah. So your marketing strategy, I mean, everything always revolves around those one or a combination of those things. And I think that it's, for every brand or even individual restaurant, identifying which of the 3 you're going to maybe lean into heavier at any given point in time can be one of the more critical decisions strategically. Because I don't know that anybody has the bandwidth, perhaps, to go after all 3 things with equal investment, vigor, focus. Sometimes you have to pick your poison on where you're going to get the best return. This is especially when you're working with a finite marketing budget. As franchise systems typically will, the franchisees paying a certain percentage of sales in, that's driving your budget, barring extra investment, both from the franchisee and franchisor. But most brands go about their business just functioning on their normal percentage contribution. And then it's okay, how are we going to carve this up? And again, usually within those 3 buckets. I always, I guess for me, more often than not, getting extra frequency was usually highest on my list, because those are people who are coming in. I've got the capacity to reach them. They already like something about the brand. All right, so that's great. So you've answered one of the most fundamental questions right away. All right, they are coming to you. It's just, now, what do I need to bring them in more often? And then that answering that is multifaceted. And it starts with the question, why aren't they coming more often? And the answer to that can be very foundational to the brand. Perhaps I've got a type of restaurant where the food is just too indulgent. Right? And it's sort of like a treat or a celebratory thing. If I'm Ruth's Chris, for example, okay, I want to increase frequency, but how many more occasions are there to be had, given the way people might normally use a brand like that?
Agreed.
So it's very, very complex. It's a tough question to answer in terms of why people are coming with the frequency that they are, and then how you increase it. But unlocking that is super important. And again, the one that I think can be tackled the most objectively, because you already have a foundation of knowledge to work with regarding the people that are always coming, they're already coming in. And by the way, that's not a monolithic, it's not a single person coming in with particular usage attributes, because you have heavier users, you've got lighter users, and then strategically deciding, again, let's say you're mostly pursuing a frequency strategy. Well, the way you go about getting higher frequency out of an existing higher frequency user is perhaps a lot different than what you're doing for your lowest frequency users. And what are the barriers for the respective pools of people? If I've only got somebody who's coming in once or twice a year, in fact, that may be the majority of the guests that are coming in are only coming in once or twice a year with a given brand. But I've got my usually for a lot of brands, these would be the people in your loyalty programs. No, those are people who may be coming in 6, 10, 12 or more times a year. I mean, my gosh, if you're in a segment like the coffee industry, they're coming in multiple times a week. That's a whole different ball game. Totally different type of scenarios when it comes to increasing frequency. So developing your strategy around that is one of the most fundamental things for the marketing and the brand team. After that, I would typically put on the list the new customer acquisition, because you can never forget that you must always be acquiring new guests. Because if you never acquire a new guest, then mortality rates dictate that eventually you are out of business.
That's the very
Right?
Okay.
Your customers die, they move away, they lose their jobs. There are a slew of things that happen to your guests, even your most loyal guests, that will result in them not going to you anymore. No matter, I can run the perfect operation, I can have the world's greatest brand, and if I are not acquiring new guests, I've got an element of risk. So there should always be a new acquisition, a part of the strategy for new customer acquisition. I think the key for a lot of brands is, like, how much weight does that get within your overall brand strategy? Again, contrasting that with the with your increased visitation need. Now, getting people to spend more is I would very important, should get ongoing focus, but I would put it definitely in third place among those priorities. And we've got to be careful when we look at this. This is, over the years, I had this conversation with my marketing team on a couple of occasions. Many brands look at it very simplistically. They look at check average. I say, how am I going to increase my check average? It can be a little bit more complicated than that. And by the way, and this relies back to check party size and your customer counts, how you measure all those things. Because, for example, I could have a situation where my actual check count goes down, which we would think is bad, but my average check goes up because I have done something in my brand architecture, in my marketing, etc., that then changes the very nature of the check, adds more people to the check. Sometimes when we're looking at very basic numbers from the restaurant reporting, we're looking at what's the check count or guest count. People use different terms for it, and what's the average check. And we're intuitively thinking, well, we always should be increasing the ticket count, the guest count. We should be trying to increase the average check, but it can be a little bit more complicated when we get underneath the numbers. For example, we could have a decrease in ticket count, but because we do something with intention that creates a greater party size. Now, that will come with an increase in the average check, but again, we've got to make sure that we're digging deep into the numbers and we really understand the dynamic and the relationship between those two components. There are periods of time where, in different conversations, I might have people on the team who would look at it very traditionally and not consider the connection between them. And I would add, even though perhaps with the exception of going after some family business, how we would tie in a kids meal promotion or something, I would say more often than not, people were looking at the numbers just, again, very, very simply as comparing today's guest count to last year's, check average this year to last year, without enough an examination of how the party composition itself may have changed. And as I'm thinking about it, a key driver for that, again, thinking about Firehouse as an example, this goes back a few years ago, but as we went to more off-premises business, the party size decreased. So our check average was at risk of going down. Because if I had, and I'll just make up some numbers, if I had an average of 5 people per check before, but now it goes down to 4.5 because more people are ordering for themselves to go versus coming in and sitting down together. Or perhaps the dynamic is, it could work the other way. Maybe before, when they were dining in, maybe parties were coming in before and ordering individually, like for a group lunch. But now, because it's going on a third-party or delivery for the office or for a to-go order for Rep Rescue, they're bundling it. So it's very important for the brands or the operator to understand the relationship between the numbers and make sure they're not being misled, misreading it, and then making bad decisions on how they're going to drive the business.
Makes sense. So it sounds like we've got back to the foundational level. There's only 3 ways: guest acquisition, guest retention, and average check size. Those are the only 3 levers that you have to increase your top line revenue. And acquisition is very difficult. Regardless of what business you're in. Obviously, we as a technology company have acquisition problems or challenges, I would call them, because it's difficult to get and convince a restaurateur that, hey, this is the right solution because it does these things and the value that it adds. But once we acquire a customer, they stay for years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We've got customers that have been with us for 21 years now. Mm-hmm. So, but in the restaurant space, it's really difficult to acquire a customer. And once you acquire them, you lose 70% of them after the first visit. That is unsustainable.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. To pick up on your first point about the difficulty of acquiring a new guest. So you spend thousands, millions of dollars to try to acquire new guests. And when they come in, assuming, obviously, first time, if you don't execute, well, let me back up. First of all, they may find out that even if you execute perfectly, the brand's just not for them. The one thing that's unique about the restaurant industry is there are a plethora of options. And by the way, what customer of yours only eats at your restaurant?
Common sense, but yeah, agreed. Right? You can't expect them to come in every day. It's not coffee. I go to Starbucks every morning, but I don't go to McDonald's every morning or 3 times a day, or again,
right.
Yeah. Or
so it's the rare brand that has the benefit. And by the way, and even though you go to Starbucks, maybe for your coffee, that is not the only restaurant of any type that you go to. You go to dozens of different restaurants. You hone in on some more than others. You're more loyal. You have greater frequency for a variety of reasons. Some are just more convenient to you. They're in your neighborhood. There's a whole slew of reasons. But that loyalty is, again, always at risk. And as I was mentioning before, you're just one life event away from losing someone. But in the tech world, obviously it's different because anybody who's consuming services from you doesn't have the number of options to go out to. It is reasonable for you to expect that you can generate loyalty that's going to keep somebody. And then the nature of the product, obviously, you don't have duplicative services for what you're selling. But yeah, in the restaurant space itself, it is very, let's say, fragmented within the consumer base.
Agreed. Yeah, and so frequency, I'm a big advocate. The sole reason I started Milagro was to fix that problem, to reduce that 70% down to 50%. That's my goal. If I and we built a calculator. I'm looking at it on our website. So if anybody wants to do this, just go to milagrocorp.com, go to solutions, go to marketing automation, pull the calculator up. So I plugged some numbers in. So if your average check size is $30, you serve 100 customers a day, 100 checks a day, and you're only open for 6 days a week, your top line revenue is more or less around $1 million. Between 900, it's 936 exactly. Mm-hmm. That means you're serving about 31,200 customers a year. So our goal, and imagine if you weren't and figured out how to do this. Like today, the technology is absolutely readily available. But if you increase your customer retention by 15%, that means the guy that comes in once a year to come in twice a year, or the guy that comes in 2 times a year to 3 times a year. So you have 12 months to bump them by 1 additional visit. Your top line revenue at 936 increases by $140,000. Like, that's the easiest lever to pull, but no restaurant does anything in terms of outbound marketing. That they don't even do the basics of it. Just communicate with that first time customer, get a phone number, get an email, add them in a sequence. So the moment they leave, they get a text. How was everything? Did we do well? If we did well, great, leave us a review. If we didn't do well, let's figure out what to do. Get a comp in place. Or in fact, most recently, I'm building for customers in public. And I was listening to this gentleman, I can't remember his name, that ran Bar Impossible, I think. And he's like, look, you already know that you're going to lose 70% of customers after the first visit. So we're implementing this strategy where you come in, we get a phone number immediately, ask for a phone number. The moment you leave, we know it was your first time. We give you a buy one, get one free offer. Second time you come in, we know it was the second time. When you leave, you get an offer for a free appetizer or dessert. Then the third time, you get a automated campaign that goes out that gives you a free drink. So what are we doing? We're driving frequency to get that 15% bump and get that extra revenue, because out of 140,000 a year, the only cost that went up is your food costs. That's 70% net margin all the way from top to the bottom line. And it's kind of strange that a lot of restaurants aren't pulling that level specifically in order to drive more frequency.
Yeah, it should be something that's pursued relentlessly. A point I'll make too is to remind people how fragile it is with even your most loyal customers. We were talking about when somebody comes in for the first time, and again, maybe there's things they don't like about the brand despite your best effort, and okay, they don't come back. You're not their cup of tea. But let's say you've got somebody who has been coming back, and they love you, but none of us are perfect, and perhaps they come in and it's on one of those terrible shifts where just everything is going wrong. You hope it doesn't happen, but it can. And that customer actually, since they love the brand so much, typically will walk away from that experience thinking to themselves, man, I really love this place, and this was so out of character. And they may have been to you 100 times before that bad experience. Now you've got a lot of loyalty built up, a lot of equity with that guest, and they'll walk away, and there's a good chance they'll come back with all that equity. But I can guarantee you, when they come back for the 102nd time, the only thing they're thinking about is this going to be a repeat of the bad experience that I had on visit 101? They're not even thinking that much about the 100 great visits that they had before that, because their hope as somebody who loves your brand is that you're not going to give them a reason to not like this place anymore. But they're going to benchmark you against that visit. And boy, I'll tell you what, if you screw it up twice in a row, there's every chance that they then say, sorry, I'm not coming back. So there's technology definitely comes into play. Marketing to the folks comes into play. Can't emphasize enough for the operators out there about how hard you have to work at getting it right. And I'll tell you another area where technology can come into play. It's trying to capture the guests who didn't have a great experience and being able to get with them in some way proactively. And it's easier said than done. But hopefully in your suite of products, you enable some things in this way. When a guest decides to tell you that something wasn't right, that is a gift to you.
That is a gift. That is absolutely. I love customers who challenge us, because then I know that they're involved. They care. If they didn't care, they'd be like, yeah, whatever, move on, right?
Right. And so you've got a chance to fix it in your business or for the restaurant operator with the guests. You've blessed me with this opportunity to make it right. And in fact, if you go about that with gusto and really come up with a great solution that is over the top, you've turned what was a negative experience into probably something that made them even more impressed with the brand than it was before they had the problem, or that they were before that. So it's so important. Now, what percentage of guests take the time to tell you that something was wrong?
Correct. Yeah.
I'd be venturing to guess, but that's why I believe so much in opening the door as wide as possible to get feedback from guests, trying to be proactive, and hopefully this is the great thing about loyalty programs and so on. And one of the challenges with third-party delivery, by the way, when it comes back to not owning the consumer data, like how are we able to follow up with that guest to find out how their experience was? That should be low-hanging fruit. We should be able to get to that guest and find out. But anytime we have an opportunity, we need to create it for that guest to tell us how things was, and then they bless us hopefully with candid feedback that gives us the opportunity to impress them after a time that we haven't been at our best.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually funny, because we just a few months ago implemented a feedback after every visit, because every visit something could go wrong. And I remember we do that today, but we built this in 2011, where, back to your point of the customers who had a bad experience, if you repeat that twice in a row, good luck, like game over, like they're moving on. There's so many other options. So we were trying to solve that problem in 2010. And I was fortunate to work with these young entrepreneurs at Genghis. And the way we solved that is we put a little code. So we gave them a coupon. So if they had a bad experience, we gave them a coupon. Hey, here's a buy one, get one free offer. Strong offer. We wanted them back. Now they're back. How do we know if it was good or bad, etc.? Obviously, offer could tell. But we put a little A on that coupon code dynamically if the experience was awesome. And we'll put a little T if it was terrible. So we didn't want to say good and bad. So we said awesome and terrible.
That's great idea.
And the staff immediately picked up. And if it was a T, everybody stopped. It's like, hey, Don, I know you had a bad experience. What can I do for you today? How was everything? And they just go a little bit above and beyond to ensure it doesn't repeat.
Yeah, outstanding idea. It's great.
Yeah. So, all right. So touching base, we touched base on the experience, acquisition, retention, average check. But let's get into how do we build loyalty within the restaurant. I have my ways, and as a consumer, there are things that I'm expecting from my favorite restaurants that they're not doing. But run us through your perspective and how did you build loyalty within. And by the way, when I say loyalty, I don't mean like force people to join a loyalty program.
Right.
I think I'm only a loyalty member. I actually just recently joined Starbucks after years. And then one other sub shop that I go to that I I'm a member. But outside of that, like none, zero.
Yeah.
So when we say loyalty is above just loyalty programs, how do we build that brand equity?
Yeah,
back?
I think this is relatively simple, but easier said than done. So the first thing is to try to get to know personally your guests. You can't know them all, especially if you're in a low frequency brand. Somebody that normally have customers coming in, just a couple times a year. But in the absence of knowing them, welcome them. I mean, that's why at Firehouse we always said welcome to Firehouse, and again, it's not a shtick. We genuinely are welcoming them. Better yet, thank them when they're on their way out. If they're walking past by, hey, thanks for coming in today. It's simple. You just have to have the presence of mind to do it and mean it, and say it sincerely. Table touches. We preach these for years. If when you make every opportunity to try to stop by the table. And by the way, it's not about going by and just saying, how was everything? Because you'll get the routine answer. A lot of times people don't want to stop and have a conversation. You catch them with a mouthful of food, whatever. They'll say, yeah, everything's great. When sometimes maybe it's not. No, you get to know them. You strike up a conversation. You see something unique about them. Hey, man, love the shirt that you're wearing today. Whatever it is. Or just say, hey, I'm really delighted that you came in today. Really appreciate your business. Just wanted you to know.
And that's it. Yeah, you don't even have to ask everything. Yeah.
That's it. Because again, if it's the normal, how is everything today? Most of people, and I'm like, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
No, it's missing the big picture. It's missing the main opportunity. Yeah. The best loyalty reward, by the way, is the spontaneous and unexpected one. With a lot of loyalty programs, when you're getting points and everything else, it's transactional. It's an entitlement. I know this is old school, sort of analog thinking, but one of the best loyalty programs would be, in my mind, would be to give your cashiers an allowance on free food that they're going to give away for the day.
Agreed. Yeah, that'd be
and say, you know what?
Surprise.
Today you get surprise and delight.
Yeah.
You have a customer. I did this one. I was standing at one of our company restaurants a couple years ago, standing by the cash register, talking with the manager. There was a cashier taking orders, and the restaurant wasn't that busy, but there was a customer that came up, and I can't remember this, but he got engaged in a conversation that it was evident to me that this was a super loyal customer. Mm-hmm. And I just sort of overheard it. And when he got to the register to order, I stepped up. I didn't even introduce myself saying, oh, I'm the CEO of Firehouse. I just said to the cashier, I said, hey, his lunch is on me today. He was like shocked. And I said, oh, hey, I heard you talking. And so thanks a lot for being such a loyal customer. And yeah, I got your lunch today.
That's how you build loyalty.
Yeah, and that person's gonna be talking about that forever.
Of course.
Much more effective than the old days of having the old punch card or giving out points. Now, you've got to have to do something like that. You actually have to have a business-minded staff that understands the purpose, and they're a partner with you and how you're trying to build business and reward people, and not just indiscriminately, giving out free food to your buddies and things. So it takes an educational process and teamwork to make something like that happen. But it is highly effective.
Yeah, I'm just loving the conversation. So there's so many different ways. I think, first of all, Chick-fil-A used to do that 100th order of the day for free. I don't know if they're still doing that or not. Like, imagine that.
Well, one of the greatest programs that we ever had in Firehouse was Name of the Day. We had our
Explain, what do you mean?
our director of social media at the time, Melissa Lee, and our VP of marketing, Krista Madonix, have worked together to come up with this program. Name of the day, where every day we would put out, primarily through social media channels, a first name. If that was your name, you got a free sub. We did it for a number of free sub, or an offer that was
Sure.
that was tied to it, and just because it was your name.
And the sweetest name in a dictionary is my name, not yours, mine.
Well, and the beauty of it was when it was going out there, people would see it, and even though it wasn't their name,
They would root for it.
if they knew it was Hamed and they knew a Hamed,
They would forward
they
it
would
to
let
you.
them. No,
Oh, wow.
or if you were
Genius.
or you worked in the office that day, and your coworker comes up, hey, let's go to Firehouse, man. You get a free sub today, and it was brilliant.
That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
So it goes so people engaged with the brand, paying attention to the brand, having a lot of fun with it, and it was a great program.
I agree. And I always tell everybody that I'm working with, it's not about discounting, it's not about coupons, promos. Sometimes it's just the basics. Like, I always use this example. A favorite restaurant of mine, I go there all the time. I spend twice as much as their average customer because I know what the average spend is. But every time I go in, like, join the wait list, and I'm treated just like everybody else. It's so simple for them to say, hey, Hamed, thanks for coming in. We've got a 45-minute line out the door, as you can see. However, considering you're a VIP customer, I'll bump you to the top of the list. Give me about 5 minutes, I'll have you seated. I would be so loyal to that brand because the experience has changed. Yeah. Imagine when you check into like a Marriott and you're a Bonvoy, and recently this happened with me at FS Tech, and he asked me, are you a Bonvoy, like, what is your status? And I said, I'm here. And he's like, all right, follow me. Walked me all the way to the counter and literally just dropped me off at the counter. No lines, nothing. Mm-hmm. Imagine that experience within the restaurant space. And everybody is used to that. Like, you've got American Airlines, like airline industry, right. Hotels, I think they crush it on that. I'm just surprised that restaurants aren't doing these little things that has no cost. All you need is the right technology in the hands of the frontline worker and enable that hostess, that cashier to say, hey, you're a VIP customer. I see it right here. I don't have to ask any questions. Like, boom, done. It's automatically awarded, and they empowering them to take that action to build loyalty outside of just giving away free food.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and tech can be of immense help in that regard. That customer identification, especially when you have lower frequency brands. I mean, you mentioned being a Starbucks customer, and if we have time, I'll try to make it into a relatively short story. I became a Starbucks customer a little later in life, and when I first went in on one occasion, it was more professional exercise to go in and just look at the operation, see what was new at Starbucks, what was going on. And I stopped there very early one morning in the one closest to my home, and there were about 3 people in front of me. And so I get in line, and I noticed that when the cashier was taking their order, she knew the first name of all these 3 people in front of me, and talk to them by name. And of course, I get up and I know they don't know me. So my experience was very transactional. What would you like? And I pick on, I'll have a skinny vanilla latte and I order that, right? But I was so impressed with them having this name recall for every single one of these guests. I said, let me stop back tomorrow and see if that was a fluke or not. So I go back in, and there's 3 or 4 people in line, and gosh darn it, if it doesn't repeat itself. And they know everybody. And then they I come up and I order, and it's just, normal transaction. I'll have skinny vanilla. Now I know the menu a little bit better. I'll have a skinny vanilla latte and get it, and I'm on my way. I figure I'll go a third day, right? And now when I go the third day, I'm thinking, I was here the last 2 days in a row. Are they going to remember my name? And they didn't, and it was normal transaction. I go a fourth day, and I get to the counter, and the cashier is doing her thing, and she looks up. She goes, "Don, skinny vanilla latte?" I was like, "Yes, yeah. Oh, I'm in. I'm part of the club." So powerful. Again, focused on it, had the benefit of the frequency to be able to do that. But that is the challenge for brands that don't have that kind of frequency. How do we use tech? How do we navigate around that to try to create that type of relationship?
And those are the problems that we're solving every day. In fact, we revamped our entire waitlist reservation app to fix that problem. So by the time the customer shows up, you know their name, you know how many times they've been there, you know how much money they spend with your brand, you know if they're a VIP or not, etc. And as long as it's made in the hands of the frontline worker, it's a game changer. And agreed, like there was a research study that came up a long time ago, and it said the sweetest name in the dictionary for everyone is their first name. And if you're not using their first name, you're gravely mistaken. Like you gotta recognize customers by their first name. And then that surprise there, and another study looked at if the customer is really happy with the brand, their likelihood of return, if they're happy with the brand, they'll come back 30% of the time. And if they're really happy, then they'll come back 66% of the time. However, if you throw a surprise in there, that the chances of them coming back goes in the 90% mark. Because of that little surprise. And it could be anything. It could be a minor little detail, or calling them by their first name, remembering their first name, giving them a free food, dessert, whatever it may be. Just if they weren't expecting it, now you're into the 90% mark. All right, let's get into the next topic. Discounting. What happens? Like obviously we're talking about different ways to increase top line revenue. Let's go to the opposite side. What happens when restaurants are just solely focused on cost savings?
Well, if you're talking about things to try to gain economy on the bottom line, and trying to save your way into higher profitability, that is not a sustainable practice. Yeah, if you're yeah, because for a lot of brands, it's because they've reduced portion sizes, they've cheapened the product quality, they've reduced staffing, which perhaps then leads to slower service times. And brands throughout the history of this industry have made that mistake. I would always tell franchisees, growing profitable sales. Because you can grow the top line in ways that aren't favorable. And this is, by the way, that can sometimes be a pain point with the franchise community, because the franchisor has an idea that's going to drive the top line, hence drive royalty on a percentage of sales, but can be a disaster for the bottom line of the franchisee. So it's got to be done wisely.
Top line growth, yeah, and you can never in a business save your way to the top, because there's a floor to savings. There's just not a ceiling to increasing top line revenue. Yeah, at some point in a restaurant, you'll hit capacity, but at that stage you're earning so much money that you just don't know what to do with it.
Well, and then and for in any multi-unit operation, when somebody reaches that point, you better be opening another restaurant.
Agreed, yeah. Get another one, yeah. And yeah. I've seen Starbucks that are literally across the street. It's a 30-second walk. Why? Because they've hit that capacity. And actually in Houston, I think it's on Post Oak, two literally right across from each other. And they're both busy.
Yeah.
So I agree. All right. Any other recommendations on the top line growth? We talked about loyalty, guest acquisition, retention, average checks, anything that you like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, one thing that was fundamental within my Firehouse experience was the philanthropic connection that the brand had. So when customers became emotionally attached to the brand, it had little to nothing to do with the in-restaurant experience, but the brand meant something else important to them. And that, in fact, of all the data that we looked at over the years, that was the most powerful piece of data, and it was substantiated through a study that Cornell University did about Firehouse and what we did in the community through the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. The factor that correlated highest to sales performance was that restaurant, starting with the franchisee, their commitment to the community, the fundraising they did, and the giving back that was done. So there are, I think all philanthropy should be undertaken on its own merits. When the Firehouse Public Safety Foundation was started, it wasn't part of a business plan or anything else. It was us wanting to give back to the first responder community so that they could better serve their communities, where, by the way, we didn't always necessarily have a restaurant in those communities. It was all done with the intent to help societally. But then a funny thing happened, was the discovery that, wow, this is really driving loyalty to the brand and our franchise community. Those franchisees that are most committed to the cause are benefiting disproportionately to a significant degree. So I encourage operators out there, each in their own way, to be kind and be generous, to be philanthropic in some way. Just for starters, because it's the right best thing to do in a world that really needs it. And then on top of that, by the way, if you're smart about it, you will find that it is additive to your business. But start by doing it from the heart.
Yeah, generally the byproduct of success is that you earn money, not the other way around. So giving back to the community, the byproduct of that should be exactly that. Well, Don, it's been an absolute pleasure. This is probably by far the most engaging conversation. I love getting into the loyalty side, the frequency. Obviously, I'm extremely passionate about that within the restaurant industry. So it's been an honor speaking with you, and I've just absolutely enjoyed the conversation. Thanks again for accepting the invitation and being on the pod.
Thanks, Hamed.